Hey, my name is Leanne, and I'm fascinated with helping women navigate how to eat, move, and care for their bodies. This has taken me on a journey from vegan, keto, high protein to everything in between. I'm a small town holistic nutritionist turned 3-time international bestselling author turned functional medicine practitioner, offering telemedicine services around the globe to women looking to better their health and stop second-guessing themselves. I'm here to teach you how to wade through the wellness noise to get to the good stuff that'll help you achieve your goals. Whether you're seeking relief from chronic ailments, striving for peak performance, or simply eager to live a more vibrant life, this podcast is your go-to resource for actionable advice and inspiration. Together, we'll uncover the interconnectedness of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress management, and mindset, empowering you to make informed choices that support your unique health journey. Think of it as quality time with your bestie mixed with a little med school so you're empowered at your next doctor visit. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn about your body and how to care for it healthfully. Join me as we embrace vitality, reclaim our innate potential, and discover what it truly means to pursue healthfulness. Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm so glad that we get to hang out today. My name is Leanne Vogel. I've been working with ladies individually since 2008, helping them recomp their body, basically change the composition of fat to muscle and look how they want to look. And one of the biggest lies out there is that if you're in a calorie deficit, you will for sure lose weight 100% without a doubt. That's what it is. The body is a mathematical sequence of calories in, calories out. If you're not losing weight, you're lying and you're stuffing your face. I want to explain why that's not always the case and what's contributing to this issue. So we're going to be talking about the hormonal blocks to fat loss. We're going to be talking about estrogen dominance and fat storage, cortisol's hidden impact on belly fat and muscle recovery, blood sugar swings and cravings, and how insulin can drive body composition. Now, insulin can drive muscle building, but excess insulin, dysregulated blood sugar can cause fat increase. So we're going to talk about all of that. And then how to fix this situation with food, stress management, training, and labs. So let's get right into it. So I'm not going to pretend that calories don't matter through this conversation because they do. But here's the major thing. Calories don't explain why two women can eat the exact same macros. Let's say they're the same weight and height. They can have the exact same macros and one loses weight while the other gains inches and feels more exhausted week in and week out. That's where hormones come in. Now, I've definitely changed my view of hormones over time. I think that hormones were a really big buzzword around 2017. It was like, everything is because of hormones. And understanding more root cause work, I see that hormones are rarely the issue, but driving the problems that we see. And the main issue is the imbalances that are then causing the hormones to dysregulate, then cause our body composition to be weird. So when it comes to body composition, this is how much fat you carry, how much muscle you build, and even how you store water. These three things are governed by our hormones. So if your hormones are dysregulated, your body's priorities shift from thriving, like easily accessing water stores, regulating cortisol, regulating insulin, to like crazy surviving. So the body starts to get really stingy with fat loss. It's going to start hoarding energy, and it makes you feel hungrier, more tired, and nothing changes. And oftentimes in this situation that's happening, a woman has just experienced the beginning stages of perimenopause. Things are changing and everything goes awry. So if you've ever said, I'm doing everything right, but nothing's working, or I'm doing the same thing that I did 5 years ago where I lost 20 pounds, it's not working, you're probably right. It's probably not working. And the numbers may look good on paper. Like you calculate your macros, you calculate your calories. You're like, yep, this is it. This is going to work. And then if your hormones are sending a completely different signal, your body's going to listen to your hormones, not your food log, not your perfectly tracked macros. So here are the really heavy hitters when it comes to blocking the body recomposition game the most. So we have insulin, which controls blood sugar and fat storage. We have cortisol, your stress hormone that eats muscle and stores belly fat. We have estrogen, which is essentially, it's an important hormone for sure, but when it's dominant compared to progesterone, we're not going to be detoxing properly and we're going to hold more weight. And then we have leptin, and this is the hormone that tells your brain that you're full. So we're going to dive deeper into each one of these in the next couple of I've planned this out in segments so that I don't miss anything. So in the next segment, we're going to be going through all these pieces. But the bottom line in this piece here that I want to really be clear to you is that you can't calorie count your way out of a hormone imbalance. I do, however, know that a lot of us, because hormone was the buzzword, we're like, I need to balance my hormones. I need to balance my hormones before I'm able to do XYZ. I think both can happen in tandem with one another. And this is why I was so impressed with one of the bioactive precision peptides called Leanne that I've started using a lot in my practice, because they're signaling molecules that tell your body to regulate processes like muscle building, hunger, energy, and even inflammation. So these aren't random herbs or buzzwords or fake it till you make it kind of things. These are clinically backed peptides derived from food that help shift the internal environment so your body can respond again. So what I've seen in my practice is ladies who are at this wall of like, the calories aren't working. I've calculated my macros. I understand that I'm inflamed. I'm tired. My cortisol's high. Estrogen's high. What do we do? It's not a matter of just eat less, move more. You need to come up with a full holistic plan. And I do see many, many times that incorporating Leanne bioactive precision peptide and fit together makes such a big difference in metabolism and fat loss without sacrificing muscle. Now that's a big piece because muscle drives metabolic balance. When we go on these low calorie diets and we are losing weight and the scale is going down, we don't really know if we're preserving muscle mass. Generally speaking, if your weight is coming off very quickly because you're using certain drugs or you're in a very strict caloric deficit program, chances are muscle is also being lost, and that muscle loss will mess up this whole flow. The leptin, the estrogen, the cortisol, the insulin, all these things that are driving this hormonal miscommunication. So I wanted to start with understanding that calories matter, but they're not the whole story. And so in this episode, I want to share with you the whole story, the holistic plan. It's not just one thing. It's not in the case of estrogen. Oh, well, estrogen is dominant, so I'm just going to take progesterone and then it'll fix this whole thing. Or insulin is elevated, so I'm just going to take berberine and it's going to fix the whole thing. No, it needs to be a full comprehensive plan. Okay. If insulin is elevated, we're looking at your carbohydrate quality. We're looking at your fat content. We're looking at how to regulate that insulin, like with a bioactive precision peptide. With cortisol, we're looking at lifestyle. We're looking at when you're eating your food, how you're eating your food, how you have a relationship with your work, and all the intricacies of how you operate in a day-to-day basis. With estrogen, we're looking at liver function in your bowel movements, because this is how your body is going to detox the estrogen. Then we'll look at imbalances in vitamin B6, which can cause issues with progesterone increase. And so all of this needs to play a role. And I don't want to say it needs a total overhaul, because that can be really overwhelming. But if you went to a practitioner or you listened to a podcast and they were like, this is the missing piece you need, this one thing, and you did it and it worked for a couple of weeks and now you're right back to square one, you need to start thinking in terms of, how do I look at this from a holistic perspective, from a big picture, high level overview of multiple different pieces, from lifestyle to diet to mental capacity, to spiritual wellness, to supplements that I'm choosing, and being really, really targeted in how you're approaching your health, especially when it comes to body recomposition. And not enough people are talking about this. It really, really requires a multiple stage approach. Now, it doesn't have to be overwhelming and it doesn't have to be overnight, but it does have to be strategic. So let's talk about estrogen dominance and fat storage. So this is a hormone that gets a lot of blame in body composition issues, and that's estrogen. First off, estrogen is not the villain. It's essential for a healthy metabolism, for mood and skin elasticity, and even the ability to build muscle. Estrogen is going to convert into testosterone via aromatase enzyme, and it is absolutely essential in a body composition goal, like with your goal that you're doing right now in wanting to change the way that your body functions and looks. But when it's out of balance, especially when it becomes dominant relative to progesterone, that's when we start to see major problems. So what's it actually going to look like on a day-to-day basis? You're going to store more fat around your hips, thighs, and sometimes your upper arms. Your periods are usually going to become heavier, more painful, or more irregular, where you're like 28 days, 31 days, 19 days, 22 days, 32 days. Like it's just all over the place. Oftentimes you're going to feel puffy, inflamed, emotionally overstimulated, especially the week before your period. I've had excess estrogen once or twice in my life. And for me, I experienced an extreme amount of overwhelm, anxiety, and depression. And it was crushing. And oftentimes when I hear this from ladies, also, they're not going to the bathroom, right? And we know that when our bowels are moving, our estrogen is detoxing. So it's really, really important. Again, it's not just take more progesterone, it'll balance estrogen, or take dim detox, it'll reduce the estrogen. It's, are you going to the bathroom? And how do we adjust your estrogen long-term with the diet choices that you're making? And despite all your hard work, the scale will barely move when there's an estrogen excess issue. Or worse, it will go up. And that is a certain sort of torture when you're eating the same every day and you're like, what is even happening? I can't even understand. When is this going to stop? So here's where it gets interesting. You don't have to have high estrogen on a blood test to be estrogen dominant. It's all about the ratio between estrogen and progesterone. So most women that I work with are low in progesterone because of chronic stress, over exercising, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies. And so it's often overlooked that estrogen is dominant to progesterone, but the estrogen level is fine. Another piece that's overlooked is how we clear estrogen. So I've mentioned a couple of times, your liver and your gut and detox pathways overall are in charge of packaging up estrogen and moving it out of the body. But if you're constipated, inflamed, or undernourished, specifically in certain B vitamins or even magnesium, the estrogen gets recirculated and keeps sending fat storage signals. So one of the tests that I do is called a GI map from Diagnostic Solutions. I've talked about this so much on the podcast. And what I love about GI map is it includes a marker called beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that reactivates estrogen. And so the reason why the stool test has beta glucuronidase on it is because the gut is very much responsible for how our body detoxes estrogen. Oftentimes, beta glucuronidase, this enzyme that will recycle estrogen, is elevated in cases of digestive dysfunction, dysbiosis, and inflammatory dysbiosis. So when we're dealing with parasites and bacterias, and you went to Italy and ate a whole bunch of things and then came back with some sort of sickness, or you went to Dominican Republic, like in my case, and came back with a gnarly parasite, all that stuff will cause us to recirculate our estrogen. So this is where nutrition and nervous system support and targeted tools can change everything. Everything. Now, when it comes to nervous system support, a big, huge, oh man, the last couple of weeks have been nuts for me. Our dog Coconut has been just not well. And then kind of like on top of that, not really planned, it kind of just worked out. We ended up getting a puppy. We thought that she was going to be better by the time the puppy came, but then she regressed and it was a total mess. And she was getting an MRI. We picked up the dog the day that she was getting the MRI, it was just nuts. My nervous system was totally dysregulated. I was a mess. I was overwhelmed. I was anxious. I was just at my end. And when that happens, a couple of days in a row for me, I know that my period is going to absolutely suck. So what I've started doing is repairing hormones the moment that overwhelm and anxiety and stress and mood stuff happens. So this really comes into play when our nervous system is dysregulated because everything that's going on, and rebalancing our stress hormones quickly is essential. So that's why there's this product, I put it on my tongue, like on the tongue, under the tongue, who cares? Just put it in your mouth. It's a powder. I hold it in my mouth, it dissolves. And like, I'm telling you, moments, I was carrying these packets in my bag while all this was happening. And I was just doing 2 a day, just regulating myself, regulating my nervous system, not getting overwhelmed, not getting anxious, because we know that long-term, these things are going to really mess us up. We're going to get stuck in fight or flight. Our stress is going to show up with bloating, cravings, irritability, trouble sleeping. So when your nervous system gets support, your hormones can start to recalibrate, and we don't get into the crazy hormone shifts and gaining weight because of one situation that happened. So the product that I'm referring to is Calm by Make Wellness. I'm going to include a link in the show notes so you can check it out. So I'll often pair diet changes when it comes to estrogen detoxification, estrogen support, making sure you're having bowel movements. So some of the diet changes that I often use in protocols for clients include cruciferous vegetables like broccoli sprouts and arugula, ground flax for gentle estrogen support. I followed this individual, and she's a practitioner, and she said, if flaxseed was so good at detoxing estrogen, it would be made into a capsule. And I've seen enough to know that cycling our seeds and using flax for gentle estrogen support is really, really helpful, because it's not necessarily like when you take flax, estrogen is just going to leave the body. But when you take flax, it helps with our bowel movements, because so many of us are not eating enough fiber, and that indirectly helps with our estrogen detox. Magnesium glycinate is another one that I use to support the bowel movements and relaxation overall. And then we have consistent protein to stabilize blood sugar and ease those mood swings. It's called hangry. You ever been hangry? Yeah, you need more protein. So your essential amino acids, your fit bioactive precision peptides, and any protein that you enjoy, like protein powder or any sort of protein, having that available to you, even if it's like a trashy Builder bar, which I do carry around in my purse just in case hangry hits. Another really good snack that I keep in my purse is any sort of meat stick that's lower in fat and higher in protein, because a lot of the meat sticks I find today are like 8 grams of fat, 4 grams of protein. You're like, this is not going to help me with my blood sugar and mood swings right now. Lentils, crunchy lentils, like a lentil snack is another really great one because it's higher in fiber, will regulate your blood sugar, and awesome to pair with the protein. So even with great food, I found that most women need help getting out of the cortisol estrogen loop. So if your body is inflamed or stressed and trying to self-protect, it's going to favor fat storage and hold onto water like crazy. I've seen, okay, so this is really interesting actually. Carbohydrates, when we consume them, for every 1 gram of carbohydrate, the body needs about 3 to 4 grams of water. Okay, so let's just do the math on this. If you eat 200 grams of carbs and you have an improper balance of cortisol, you're going to carry 800 grams of water. So 800 grams, 2 pounds. Okay, you following me? You've had 200 grams of carbs in a day. 200 grams of carbs are going to be 4 grams of water that your body holds for every gram. So that's 800 grams of water. That's 1.7 pounds. So if your cortisol is dysregulated and your nervous system is janked, you're going to have a lot of water weight. So if you feel like your lower body is inflamed, it's unchanging, like no matter what you do, consider that you do not have a willpower problem, but you have an estrogen clearance problem. which is corrected with the cruciferous vegetables, the ground flax, making sure that you're pooping, focusing on your liver detox, focusing on methylation, and a nervous system dysregulation, which is supported through lifestyle factors, breathing before eating, really making sure that you're in a parasympathetic state while you're consuming food, a parasympathetic state while you're sitting and listening to a podcast. I know with me, I do a lot of breathing exercises before I record these podcasts. I have 6 episodes back to back to back that I'm going to be recording today nonstop. And so I need to keep my nervous system super regulated. And oftentimes what that will look like when I get home from the gym or I'm doing a bunch of work is I will take the Calm packets to just keep my nervous system regulated, because for me, I'm not doing the dysregulation thing where I don't eat. I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, like we're just not going there. So let's get into a little bit more of the cortisol piece. So cortisol isn't bad. It's your body's natural stress hormone, and it plays a role in blood sugar, energy, inflammation. But in our modern world, cortisol tends to be chronically elevated. And as it gets more and more and more elevated for a long period of time, we're going to tank. And so oftentimes high cortisol, which is the first stage of the process, is going to show up as waking up tired, but you feel like you can't fall asleep even though you're exhausted. You're holding fat, especially around your belly. You feel wired, overstimulated, or like your brain is always like on. You get inflamed after workouts, or you feel like you're not recovering well. Despite clean eating and movement, the scale is not moving. Let's say you're in a 300 calorie deficit, or I've seen even 800 calorie deficit with food and movement, and like nothing's working. That's often a cortisol issue. Now, cortisol issues can be due to a whole bunch of things. So let's go through some of the patterns that I see. When it comes to HPA dysfunction, oftentimes this is at the root of what's happening. And so HPA dysfunction is usually caused by anger, fear, depression, guilt, noise pollution, chemicals, heavy metals, EMF, radiation. It could be geophysical. It can be due to mold or surgery. And oftentimes there's 4 different patterns. Okay. So we have metabolized cortisol, which is basically your body breaking down cortisol. And then we have free cortisol, which is the active, like available cortisol. So there are 4 different patterns that our body can fall into. So we have low metabolized cortisol to free cortisol, which is high. So low metabolized, high free. So this is often a sign of sluggish cortisol clearance. So since free cortisol is a very small percentage of the body overall, and if it's high, but there aren't metabolites being excreted readily, it can cause an elevation in free levels. So this is often due to poor liver function, not eating enough, hypothyroidism. Cortisone shots and cortisone work can also lower cortisol. And when the thyroid slows, everything slows down, including cortisol production and the clearance of cortisol by the liver. So the thyroid and adrenals may need to be addressed together when we look at these patterns. The easiest way to know what pattern you have is to do a Dutch test. And this is what I recommend, like for everyone, to just understand their adrenal function. Oftentimes when we're looking at this high free, low metabolized, this is often a thyroid pattern. A lot of my gals that have thyroid dysregulation will show up with this pattern. And then we have high metabolized, low or normal free cortisol. So this is an aggressive breakdown of cortisol. So metabolism of cortisol is basically increased, and this can be due to obesity, high insulin, inflammation, hyperthyroid, or being on too many medications for thyroid or too much. SIBO will do this. Long-term high cortisol and stress will do this. Long-term glucocorticoid use will do this. We need to find out the root cause of the inflammation before anything else can change here. So reducing inflammation will reduce overall cortisol production. This is such a common pattern. Above all other patterns, if you have a thyroid dysregulation issue, you're in the first camp. And pretty much everyone else has a high metabolized, low or normal free cortisol due to inflammatory processes. So what I do as a practitioner, when I see a high metabolized, low free, is that we will look at more of a detox work, considering GI work, avoiding stimulants, and looking at the root causes of hyperstimulation. We don't want to address or stimulate cortisol. And so we want to do more restorative practices while we look at inflammatory processes overall. The third pattern of this cortisol dysregulation is low metabolized cortisol with low free cortisol. So this is true HPA dysfunction, basically the brain not telling the adrenals to make cortisol, and steroids suppress HPA access. Okay, so that needs to be thought of. Opioids will also completely shut down the HPA access. Accutane has severe effects on the hypothalamus and can absolutely destroy cells. And so if you've been dealing with this low metabolized cortisol, it's basically a communication error between the brain and adrenals due to a hypothalamic issue. And symptoms can include fatigue, shakiness or lightheadedness, a dizziness upon standing, an unstable mood, depression, poor recovery from exercise. And so in this case, this is an entire rebuilding strategy from your actual adrenals to the brain and everything in between. The last pattern of cortisol dysregulation is a high metabolized, high free. And so this is another true HPA dysfunction. It's basically the brain not telling the adrenals to reduce cortisol production, so it's just pumping it out. And this is where we see the high free cortisol, free cortisone, and high metabolized cortisol. And so it'll be a true representation overall of high cortisol production by the adrenals. And so everything is high. You're making a ton of cortisol. You're not clearing it out. You're going to be dealing with anxiety, depression, brain fog, frequent colds and infections, weight gain, muscle loss, weight gain and muscle loss, sleep issues. So a lot of these have to do, like this specific pattern has to do with inflammation, blood sugar dysregulation. Fasting does not help with this. And I mention that because so many of our listeners are still doing fasting or a ketogenic diet, a low carb diet. And when they start to gain weight, they start to incorporate more and more fasting. And that's not the solution here. And so oftentimes this is, again, looking for root causes, calming the body down, using L-theanine and reishi, and not pushing yourself to the max. So if you're working at building muscle and you have any of these imbalances, it's going to be harder to do in a toxic environment, specifically when it comes to your stress hormones, because your stress hormones are going to block your results. And in the examples that I just shared with you, we need to make sure that we're regulating this. Otherwise, the weight's not going to move. Okay, blood sugar, insulin, cravings, and all the details around that. Let's get into it. So insulin is your body's blood sugar regulator. So when you eat, especially carbs or sugar, insulin gets released to help shuttle that glucose into the cells for energy and storage. Okay, that sounds simple, right? But here's the kicker. If your body is constantly pumping out insulin, either from frequent eating, processed foods, stress, or sleep deprivation, you start to lose sensitivity to it. And this is called insulin resistance. It's an easy test. It costs about $10 via blood work, and you can see how you're doing on your insulin. And so many people don't test for it. So it's basically a silent block to fat loss for so many women. And I'm not just talking about diabetics or people with prediabetes. I'm talking about like regular women who has normal labs, their glucose is fine, but they never see their insulin levels, so they don't know. And usually when the insulin gets beyond 10, 15 or so, we're going to start to see issues with this. And the issues can be struggling with stubborn belly fat, craving carbs at night, feeling shaky, irritable, or hangry between meals, gaining weight despite clean eating, waking up in the middle of the night, or sleeping poorly. So these are real world signs of blood sugar dysregulation, even if your fasting glucose is totally normal. So here's what insulin is basically doing when we become resistant. So if your body is pumping out a ton of insulin, it's going to basically be in storage mode. So the message that gets sent to the body is store. Okay. So even if you're eating in a deficit, but your insulin is high, your body will prioritize storing energy and not burning it. And so the worst part is that high insulin often goes hand in hand with high cortisol. So you've kind of like got the two fat storage hormones like totally running the show. So this is why the answer isn't always keto or cutting carbs altogether, because that will drive adrenal dysfunction in a lot of women, especially those who are still having their period. So instead of thinking of it like that, we basically want to retrain your body's response to carbs by building metabolic flexibility, improving insulin sensitivity, and using nutrients and peptides to reset the signaling system, I should say. Okay, so this is a multi-phased approach. A lot of ladies will cut the carbs, start fasting, and like I mentioned, with those imbalances with the adrenals, that can actually make things worse. So I love using lean bioactive precision peptides. So unlike a GLP-1 that basically blunts hunger to the ground and causes absolute muscle wasting, lean supports body composition, not just weight loss. So as a coach, I could care less if the scale is moving if you tell me that you're feeling more tight and toned every week, because the scale could totally remain the same. You're building muscle, you're burning fat, you're getting tighter and toned, and your body is changing. That's what we're looking for. And unfortunately, a lot of us will prioritize the scale moving before we'll think about what muscle is being affected by the actions that we're taking. And this is why the answer isn't always cutting carbs. So we want to feel more satiated. We want to have fewer crashes, and we want our cravings to actually like calm down, because insulin will also drive the cravings and the leptin issues and just cause this physiological environment where the body says like, okay, we can release some of this stored energy now. We don't need to hold on to it anymore. And how we do that is regulating our insulin and all of the pieces that we're talking about today. So some of the key things you could think about is eating protein and fiber like first. So what am I having for snack? What am I going to do for protein? What am I going to do for fiber? What am I having for breakfast? What's the protein? What's the fiber? And just constantly thinking about that. Also, going for a 10-minute walk after dinner does great things to just regulate yourself. You can look at carbohydrates. Chances are there are a lot of carbs that you're eating that are unnecessary. And by focusing on fiber and setting a fiber goal at 30 to 40 grams per day, you're going to naturally then choose foods that are better for your insulin regulation overall. And then supplements. I haven't really seen berberine be like super helpful long-term, especially when there's gut issues. I do far prefer the lean peptide over berberine if I can help it, because berberine also impacts the gut because it's an antimicrobial, and then it can cause issues down the line if the individual has like an insufficiency issue. Okay, we've kind of like sprinkled in solutions here and there, but I kind of want to spend the rest of the time talking about how to understand all of this and what changes to make when I'm talking about a holistic plan. Okay, so it's not about how much you eat, though it is a little bit. And it's not about your macros, though it is a little bit, right? We need to kind of think about all these pieces. It's about how your body is interpreting those inputs. And then hormones like estrogen, cortisol, insulin, leptin create the operating system that your body runs on. So if that system is glitchy, like no amount of clean eating is going to make it go. I think you're convinced of this, right? So food, like I said, protein at every meal, at least 30 grams. Smart carbohydrates. If you set a fiber goal of 30 to 40 grams, you will naturally choose better carbs like root vegetables, berries, those sorts of things. And a real big tip, if you are lifting, the best time to saturate your carbohydrates is before and after your lift by a couple of hours. So 2 hours before, 2 hours after, that'll encompass maybe 2 or 3 meals. And it's best to make sure that those meals are higher in carbohydrates around your lift. Then we have healthy fats in moderation, not like massive keto extremes, especially when you're dealing with hormone dysregulation issues, but healthy fats. And stop skipping meals, like skipping breakfast or under eating all day will just raise cortisol and mess with your blood sugar and set you up for cravings later on. I have no problem like finishing eating at 5 p.m. so you have like a good fast through the night. That's fine. But waking up and not having food for 3 to 4 hours before you have your like early lunch is just not acceptable for this pattern. Then we'll talk about nervous system regulation. So you can eat perfectly and still hold on to fat if your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight. And that's why I say, like, for me, the easiest way to do this is to walk around with my calm packets and just know that like when I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated, I take one. And even when I'm not, I take one a day just to keep myself regulated. So you could try morning sunlight within 30 minutes of waking, breath work or vagus nerve stimulation, like humming or gargling or even singing to worship music does a great job. Swapping intense morning workouts for strength workouts, like not high intensity interval training, but like slow and steady strength workouts are so good for the nervous system, or even walking at some point during the day, and prioritizing sleep over steps. So I have a lot of clients that will say like, I woke up early to like hit my step goal. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Please sleep. So another piece about the training, we want to build, not burn. So many of us are in this, well, I need to burn XYZ amount of calories, and that's going to translate to XYZ. The only time you need to be thinking about calorie burn is when you're on a cut, and a cut should be like maximum 3 months if you're going at a slower pace. So if you're constantly in a deficit, constantly thinking about the calories that you're burning in your movement, you're like not hitting the mark. So what this looks like instead is lifting weights 2 to 4 times a week with a progressive overload, maybe limiting fasting cardio to like 1 time a week and HIIT to 1 time a week, and walking daily. Like track your steps, increase it by 10% every week. When I'm not in a cut, I like to get 6,000 to 9,000 steps a day. It means about 90 minutes of walking and about 3 to 4 times that I'm walking in a day. And I really enjoy that, but it's very individual. Also, you need 1 full rest day. None of this active rest stuff. What is that? Active rest. It's an oxymoron. Makes no sense. No, absolutely not. We need to make sure that we're recovering. You can't recover if you never recover because you don't take rest. Okay, labs. You don't need a ton of fancy tests based on what we talked about. Fasting insulin, ideal. We want it between 5 and 10, ideally like 8, 5 to 8. Cortisol. I would do saliva in some form or Dutch, which is dried urine. I think it's better than blood. I think the blood one is trash. Don't even bother. Estrogen and progesterone. I think the best time to test for these is mid-luteal, usually about a week after you ovulate. And ideally in a Dutch test as well, because you'll just see a better picture of what's going on. You can definitely test leptin in the blood if fat loss is totally stalled. It is more of an expensive test with most labs. And DHEA, oh my goodness, you need to test your DHEA. It's great to test in blood. It'll also show up in the Dutch test, but I love DHEA. See, the marker you're looking for is DHEAS. And pair this with symptoms, not just numbers. So if you get like a super high DHEAS and you're like, what is going on? Just critically think through all of it. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that it helped connect some of the dots between hormones and body recomposition. Definitely check out the show notes. I'll include a bunch of supports in there, and I'll see you back here next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Healthful Pursuit Podcast. Join us next Tuesday for another episode of the show. If you're looking for free resources, there are a couple of places you can go. The first to my blog, healthfulpursuit.com, where you're going to find loads of recipes. The second is a free parasite protocol that I've put together for you that outlines symptoms, testing, and resources to determine whether or not you have a parasite, plus a full protocol to follow to eradicate them from your life if you need to. That's available at healthfulpursuit.com/parasites. And last but certainly not least, a full list of blood work markers to ask your doctor for so that you can get a full picture of your health. You can grab that free resource by going to healthfulpursuit.com/labs. The Healthful Pursuit Podcast, including show notes and links, provides information in respect to healthy living, recipes, nutrition, and diet, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Healthful Pursuit Podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without any representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified health practitioner with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.